Hello everyone and welcome back to another Marvel Champions video. Today Fantasy Flight announced their newest hero for Marvel Champions. This is Nova. I'm not really familiar with the Nova character, so we're just going to still take a look at the cards and I'm going to describe them. I'm going to let you know what I think of the cards. So first up here we have Sam Alexander. This is Nova's alter ego. 3 recovery, civilian, hand size of 6 with 10 hit points. And as an alter ego action, spend 1 resource of any type, search your deck and discard pile for a Supernova Helmet, add it to your hand, put it into play instead if you paid for this ability using a wild resource. So I do like the fact that if you lose the upgrade, you can then flip back to alter ego. It looks like you can flip back to alter ego, spend the resource, and grab it out of your discard pile if something causes you to discard it. And then if you use a wild resource, it gets put into play. So that is Sam Alexander. We're going to move into our next card, which is actually the helmet. So this is the Supernova Helmet. 1 cost upgrade. Generates a mental resource if you discard it. It's armor. Nova gains the aerial trait. And it's a hero response. Exhaust the helmet to generate a wild resource. So basically, gives him aerial and then also allows it to be exhausted to gain resources. So that's a pretty good way to get resources with it. You could also gain aerial with it as well. So that's the helmet. Into our next card. So this is Nova, the hero form. So Nova, hand size goes down to 5 with 10 hit points. 1 thwart, 1 attack, 2 defense. He's a champion. And as a response, after you use one of Nova's basic powers, thwart, attack, or defense, ready the helmet. So basically, you can, let's say you can attack, and then use the helmet to do something, and then ready the helmet. Let's say you use the helmet to get a resource. You play, you do something, you use one of his powers. You can then ready the helmet after you use one of his basics. That's pretty good. So then you can gain multiple uses from his helmet to get multiple wild resources. So again, 1 thwart, 1 attack, 2 defense, and he's a champion. Next card here. We have the Lightspeed Flight. It's a 2-cost event. It's a superpower, and the thwart generates a mental resource if you discard it. It says double the number of wild resources generated while playing or paying for this card. And then hero action, thwart, remove 3 threat from a scheme. So let's see here. Double the number of wild resources generated while paying for this card. So I guess if you're using wild resources to pay for it, those wild resources are doubled. Because let's see if I'm reading that correctly. Double the number of wild resources generated while paying for the card. So, like, I guess if you pay for it with a wild resource, like 1 wild resource, it counts as 2, I guess. And then, as the actual hero action, it's a thwarting event, so remove 3 threat. That's pretty interesting. So that is the Lightspeed Flight. Next up here, we have Pot Shot. It's a 2-cost event. It's an attack and a superpower. Generates an energy resource if you discard it. And let's see, double the number of wild resources generated while paying for this card, just like the last one. As a hero action, attack, deal 4 damage to an enemy. So if you have a way to generate just a lot of wild resources, you can get these off for like pretty cheap. Because let's say like it costs 2, you can basically, if you spend the wild resource, you're going to get basically 2 if you're paying for this particular event, and then it deals 4. So that could be pretty good. Sounds like he's going to have a pretty good like economy as far as getting events out for a little bit less. So that's the Pot Shot. Into our next card, we have Ms. Marvel. So this is the ally version of Ms. Marvel. 3-cost ally. It's a champion, or she's a champion and inhuman. 3 hit points. Generates a physical resource if you discard it. 1 thwart, 1 attack with 1 consequential damage each. As a hero response, after you play an event, exhaust Ms. Marvel and deal 1 damage to her to return that event to your hand. I didn't play a whole lot of the Ms. Marvel deck, but I remember there were events and things that you could use to bounce, cards back to your hand. So that's they're kind of boiling that down to actually fit on her ally card as well. So and then it comes in with 3 hit points, does 1 attack and 1 thwart. Can do that up to 3 times, or you can also just use an event and then ping her for 1 damage to get that event back. If it's like a really good like attack event, you can use that event and then pay 1 damage to Ms. Marvel to get the event back, which is pretty cool. So I don't know exactly what you'd be using her mostly for, if you'd be using her for thwarting, attacking, or her ability. I think it's all dependent on what you have in your hand and what events you have, but her ability is really strong. So that adds Ms. Marvel into our next card. We have Unleash Nova Force, 1-cost event. It's a superpower. Generates an energy resource if you discard it. Max 1 per round. And as a hero action until the end of the round, each time Nova defeats an enemy or removes the last threat from a scheme, ready Nova and draw a card. So you limit it to once per round, but let's say you remove the final threat off a card, and you defeat an enemy, you get to then ready Nova and draw a card. So you can basically attack with him, defeat an enemy, ready him, draw a card, and then do a thwarting attack. Do a thwart, remove some threat. Let's see, if you remove the last threat, you get to ready him and draw a card. That can be pretty good, especially if there's like a lot of like really low cost, or not low cost, but low health minions out that have maybe like 1 health or something like that. You could clear off a bunch of them. Something like Ultron drones would be really strong with this card, because you defeat the Ultron drone, ready him, draw a card, attack again, defeat another Ultron drone, ready him, draw a card, and it's you're only allowed to use it once per round, because it seems like it's pretty strong. So that is Unleashed Nova Force. We're going to move into our next card. We have Connection to the World Mind. It's a resource. It looks like it generates a wild resource if you discard it, and the connection to the underworld does not count toward your hand size. So whatever your hand size is, this basically can just sit in there and not count against it. And then it looks like when you discard it, it generates a wild resource. I imagine since this card actually generates a wild resource, it would then trigger those 2 other cards that when you pay wild resources to play them, they're double. So that's Connection to the World Mind. I don't know how many of that we're actually going to get in the deck. I would imagine we get probably at least more than 1, I would imagine. Because a couple of his cards earlier actually have certain interactions with that resource type. So that is Connection to the World Mind. We're going to move into the next card. Next up, we have Locus. So this is an aggression card. Looks like his deck is going to be an aggression build. So let's see. The Locus, 2-cost ally, generates an energy resource if you discard it. Comes in with 2 hit points. 1 thwart for 2 consequential damage, and 1 attack for 1 consequential damage. And play only if your identity has the champion trait. And after a hero response, after Locus enters play, add 1 aggression event from your discard pile to your hand. So if you have like a really good aggression card that you played earlier, you can play Locus, and then when it enters play, you get that card back. So that's pretty cool. So that's the Locus. Into our next card. We have Pitchback. It's a 1-cost event. It's aerial and then attack. Generates a physical resource if you discard it. Play only if your identity has the aerial trait. So if you have the helmet out, you have aerial. And as a hero response attack, after your hero attacks, deal 4 damage to an enemy. So basically you attack, and then in response to attacking, you spend 1 resource to play this to deal an additional 4 damage, basically. So Pitchback is pretty good. I could see a lot of these actually these events working well in my Quicksilver aggression deck. So I could say like I can I don't know if Quicksilver doesn't have aerial, but I have upgrades that can give him aerial. This one probably won't work as well as some of the others, but we'll take a look at those in just a moment. So that is Pitchback. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have 1x1. It's a 1-cost event. It's an attack. Generates an energy resource if you discard it. As a hero action attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy. If the attack defeats that enemy, deal 2 damage to an enemy. So basically, you deal 2 damage to an enemy. If it defeats it, you get to deal 2 damage to an additional enemy. So 1 cost to do 2 damage. I think that's pretty decent. And then if it defeats an enemy, you're basically getting, for 1 resource, you're getting essentially 4 damage out of it, as long as the first attack defeats an enemy. So that is pretty good. That's 1x1. Into our next card. We have Fluid Motion. It's a 1-cost upgrade. It's a skill. Generates an energy resource if you discard it. It's a hero response. After you play an attack event, exhaust the card. Your hero gets +1 attack until the end of the phase, max 1 per attack event. This is one card I would definitely think would go well on my Quicksilver deck. So Quicksilver, so like let's say I have a couple of attack events in there, like one which is just deals damage to an enemy based on your attack. So you play that. You then, exhaust this, and then Quicksilver gets a +1 attack as well on top of whatever else his attack already is. And then, you can attack with Quicksilver, and then Quicksilver gets to ready himself, so you readies himself, and then attacks again. And then potentially, if you have something in your hand like Always Be Running or anything that lets you ready your character, you can attack again as well. So This could be a really good card in that deck. So that is Fluid Motion. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up we have Everyday Hero. It's a resource. Let's see. It generates a wild resource if you discard it. And while your identity has the civilian trait, this card can be spent for any player and gains the text response after you spend this card for a player. Heal and damage from that player's identity. So it looks like if your teammate is trying to play something, they can then play this card. You can play it for them to give them that resource, and then after you do it, they heal 1 damage from their identity. I guess you could also use it on yourself, and then I would imagine it doesn't say it's an alter ego card. I guess it has to have civilian. So I don't know if Nova has the civilian trait, but if you have any heroes that somehow have the civilian trait on them, I don't know if any heroes do. Yeah, so while your identity has a civilian trait, this card can be spent for any player. So it looks like you can spend it on yourself without while your identity has a civilian trait. So you have to be basically in a civilian form to do it. And then you can spend it on a teammate's card, and after they do, they can heal 1. So that's going to be interesting. So I wonder exactly if there's any heroes that have civilian in there. I know a lot of them have it on their alter ego side. I just don't know if there's any heroes that are both hero form and civilian. That'd be interesting if they ever do that. So that's Everyday Hero. Into our next card. We have No Quarter. It's an, let's see, 2-cost event. Generates a mental resource if you discard it. It's an attack. It says requirement is physical. So it looks like you have to potentially spend that resource to use it. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it means, because I don't know if I've seen a card that actually has that kind of requirement on it. But as a hero action, it's an attack. Deal 4 damage to an enemy. For each point of excess damage dealt to that enemy by this attack, discard the top card of your deck and add each aggression card discarded this way to your hand. So, pretty good card. So let's say you use it to defeat a minion that has 2 health. You're dealing 2 extra damage. You're then discarding... let's see this. For each point of excess damage, discard the top card of your deck. So you're discarding, in this situation, discarding 2 cards, and then you're adding each aggression card that you discarded to your hand. That's a really interesting card, especially if you know what's coming up in the in your deck. If you have a way to look at the top cards in your deck, rearrange them, play this, and then you deal the 4 damage, and then if you know exactly if you stack it in such a way that all the cards on top of your deck are aggression cards, they immediately just get discarded and come to your hand. So that could be really interesting, especially if you have a way to know what's coming up. But then even if you don't, you have the potentially get more aggression cards in your hand, which is pretty good. So that is No Quarter. We're going to move into our next card here. Next up, we have Armadillo. I think this is this the... doesn't say if it's the... I think this is the Nemesis. It doesn't particularly say on the card that it is. Let's see. So Armadillo, it's a minion. Comes in with 1 scheme, 2 attack with an asterisk. 8 hit points. He's brute and elite. Let's see, toughness, and Armadillo can have any number of tough status cards. So they stack. Usually, status effects. If you have a tough status card, you can't get another one on top of it. They usually don't stack, but this allows them to stack. Let's see, force response. This is for his attack and his scheme. After Armadillo activates against you, give him a tough status card. So, depending on what he's going to do, if he's going to attack, he's going to get a tough status. If he's going to scheme, he's going to get a tough status as well. So he could be potentially really difficult to defeat, depending on how many toughness cards he has. And then also he has 8 hit points on top of that ability. So he's going to be definitely a very strong minion. So that's Armadillo. We're going to move into our next card. We have Roland Roman. It's an attachment. It's a condition attached to Armadillo. If Armadillo is not in play, search the encounter deck and discard pile for Armadillo. Put him into play, engaged with you, and attach his card to him, and then shuffle the deck. Gives it +2 attack. Has 2 boost icons as well. While Armadillo has a tough status card, characters cannot defend against his attack. So while he has toughness on him, his attacks basically will always go through, at least the heroes. Doesn't say anything about characters cannot defend against his attack. So I don't know if that means that usually the I don't know if that works with allies, though. The allies don't really have a defense value, so they might be able to block. But he's also going to get +2 attack, and it doesn't look like there's a way to discard this attachment either. A lot of the other kind of big attack buff cards on minions or even villains once they get used, they get discarded once they're done, or they have some kind of alternate cost on them, say like discard, like these 3 resource types to get rid of it. And then also it brings, this is a really rough attachment because it also brings Armadillo into play if he isn't already in play. So if he's in play, this is attaches. If he's not in play, you basically search the deck for him and attach it. And then makes it so that you can't block the attacks if he has a tough status card. So it looks like you're going to have to rely on a lot of, if he has a bunch of toughness cards on him, you're going to have to rely on doing a bunch of, maybe have an ally ping 1 damage off of him to get rid of it. Have your character attack to ping another one off. So you're basically going to have to ping away all his toughness status cards to make it so you can block this attack. And so that is Roland Roman. We're going to move into our final card here. And final card today is Tough It Out to Treachery. One revealed, give Armadillo and the villain each a tough status card. If 1 or fewer tough status cards were given this way, this card gained Surge. So I think the only way that you're going to not have more than 1 get off is if Armadillo is not in play. So let's say you defeat Armadillo, he's in the discard pile, this comes out later. This says give Armadillo and the villain each a tough status card. If 1 or fewer status cards were given, so let's say the villain already has a tough status card, the villain generally cannot get another one, so then it was Surge. But I think if Armadillo is in play, because it looks like as long as you're giving at least 1 of those status cards off, you're not going to have the Surge effect. So if Armadillo is in play, he's going to get 1 regardless, because he can, even if he has more than 1, because he can stack them. I think the villain is the only one that won't be able to stack them. So if you give 1 to the villain, you don't get Surge, but the villain for some reason already has 1, has a tough status card, it says if 1 or fewer were given, it gets Surge. So depending on what's out, it may Surge or it may not Surge, but also then it gives him an additional, if Armadillo's in play, it gives him an additional tough status card. So it seems like Armadillo is going to be a pretty rough minion to go against, based on him having a high amount of health, him having the ability to stack toughness status cards, and then whenever he activates, he gets his tough. I think whenever he activates, he gets 1. Let me go back a couple cards here. Yeah, so after he activates and gets you, give him a tough status card. So I guess the way to prevent him from activating and getting additional tough status cards is to stun him potentially. But then again, he comes in with 8 hit points, comes in with 1 automatic toughness, and they can stack toughness cards as well. So he's definitely going to be hard to handle. But that's going to do it for this video. So again, I'm not very familiar with the Nova character, but this is the newest hero announced today by Fantasy Flight. I'm not sure when this deck will be coming out. I think it probably comes out. I'm thinking it comes out after Sinister Motives, hopefully, because I definitely am more interested in playing the Spider-Man campaign box than I am playing the Nova deck. The Nova deck does look interesting, but again, it's a character I'm not very familiar with. But again, that's going to do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll be back again in the future with more Marvel Champions videos. Until then, thanks again for watching, and have a good one.